Hello, Dr. Bartman. This is Megan Mountain and Sam Hines' presentation on we had hearing impairment for our adaptations project. So we started with an overview of hearing impairment. It can happen in the inner, middle, or outer ear. There are three types of hearing loss. There's conductive, there is sensorineural, and there's also central hearing loss. The sensorineural usually occurs on the inner ear, and it's more related to parts of the brain. It's the least frequent type you'll see, and it's the most difficult to treat. Conductive hearing loss is usually a structural problem, which happens on the outside of the ear that you can actually see. That is usually treated through medication or through surgery. And then there is sensorineural hearing loss, which is also in the inner ear. It's usually connected with the auditory nerve, and that is permanent. And that is when you will see people with hearing aids. They usually have sensorineural hearing loss. Um, these are caused by a variety of factors. It could be genetic, it could have been through an injury, or it could have been through external things such as an infection, an illness, medication, or it could even be either repeated or excessive loud noise can lead to these. There are signs that you can look for, both, I guess, as a parent when your kid is young or when you are a teacher. If a student has delayed speech, if their speech isn't clear, if they have difficulty following directions, if they're often saying huh or what when no one else is. And you can also hear if they're with music or TV, if they have the volume up at an unusually loud volume. That is a sign that they could have a hearing impairment. Um, we got our data for our statistics from the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders. Their data was really comprehensive. Um, 2 to 3 out of about 1,000 children in the United States are born with levels of hearing loss. Uh, Obviously, these things do happen during children's lives because it is estimated that 30 school children per 1,000 have a hearing loss. So that could mean that illness or injury or infection or something like that is the more common, I guess, than people who are born with a detectable level of hearing loss. Um, a lot of those probably occur with the 5 out of 6 children who experience ear infections by the time they're 3 years old. If those go wrong or poorly, that can lead to permanent hearing loss. Um, there are many adaptations that teachers can use. Some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them we hadn't thought of before we started doing our research. Obviously, get them as close to the front of the room as possible to the teacher or speakers. It's also important to reduce noise in the background. So that could be if you have like the window or the door open. It could also be if you are running the air conditioning too often or the heater too often. If you have like a fridge in your room or a projector or anything that has like a humming noise, that can be very distracting. There's also some really interesting things like these FM systems where they can connect their hearing aids to a microphone. So the microphone picks up the audio from the teacher and then it transmits sound directly into the student's hearing aid. That's something I didn't know about. That was really cool. Um, there's also speech to text translation where a laptop or a tablet has a microphone that is picking up the audio from the teacher and then it displays it in text on the screen. I have to assume that there is some inefficiency with those devices, knowing how the diction things they don't always pick up the audio verbatim. And then you should also be time you put a video up, you can always turn on subtitles. That's something that's a very easy adaptation. And also that's why when like the emergency alarms go off, why they have the blinking lights is for students with hearing impairment. So that's really helpful to them. As far as the instruction goes, there's many things you can do as well. Anytime you have a lecture or you're giving auditory directions, you should provide a printed copy for your students. Um, you should always write things on the board. You should be careful to use hand gestures and facial expressions and other things like that to communicate what you were saying. This is one that I really like too. It's good to signal the student's attention before speaking. Maybe they're working and you just want to give a little bit of instruction to the whole class. You can just come by and kind of tap their desk or something like that to get their attention, and then they know to look at you and they can focus up and they have a better chance of hearing you when you start to teach. A buddy system is really effective. If you have a student that they know and they trust, that student can reinforce and repeat auditory information to them. And it's always nice to repeat or rephrase information, and you allow them to process and even complete their work with a little bit of extra time. That is no problem. The research we did, it talked a lot about how you want to be careful to not let these students get left behind in like class discussions and stuff like that. As we say here, pragmatic information or language that supports social communication is learned more slowly by children with hearing impairments. So you should really work on modeling, reinforcing, and encouraging. Excuse me. You don't want to leave them out of classroom activities. I think it's important to always, if you're going to ask them to participate, have a visual there on their desk, have something they can be reading off of, so you're not putting them on the spot at all. Um, Practice having them maintain conversations. Don't just let them say one thing and kind of retreat. Continue a conversation, have them listen, process what they're hearing, and then practice speaking back to you. You always want them to join conversations or activities and do their best to stay on topic. Those are all really good things to encourage with your students. These are some of the references that we use for our research. I think that is about it. One thing that we wrote in our summary that I just wanted to say is that these books and this class has really taught us that students really benefit from being exposed to as many different perspectives and points of view as possible. So it's really important as a teacher that you don't just say, okay, well, this student is hearing impaired, so I'm not going to make them participate in class. Hopefully they just get all the work done. I think it's beneficial to them and it's beneficial to everyone if you do whatever you can to make sure that they are an equal participant in anything that is happening. That is our presentation. We will also send our summary to you, and thank you for listening.